Hi everyone, it's Christine. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. So this is Wayscape Wednesdays. These are videos that I release to talk about topics like organizational effectiveness, leadership and management, and the future of work. So in my last video, which was actually my first video, I talked about this issue of hybrid. And what I offered up was that hybrid is actually not the problem to solve. The problem to solve is how we manage people. And more specifically, I argue that we need to shift from command and control to a more people-centric management if we want all of these things that we talk about as part of future of work to actually take hold. I ended my video by saying that I would provide some concrete actions that a manager can take if they want to do that transition from command and control to people centricity. And so I'm happy to share those with you today. 4 actions. So first action that you can take is get to know your people. The goal is to get to the point that for every person on your team, you know what knowledge and skills they bring to the table. You know what their interests are. You know what their ambitions are. Where do they want to grow? And you know what their priorities are. What's important to them. You don't need to know the ins and outs of every single person. Just know a few things, a few things for each of these categories. This will help you better align roles and responsibilities to the right person, which will actually help each person better contribute to the team. And it'll help you do that alignment not only today, but 3, 6, 12, 18 months from now, looking in down the road. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I manage a marketing team within a department and Jill is on my team. Jill has been on my team for the last 18 months, 2 years. I know because of my conversations with Jill that she stays on top of digital marketing trends. She reads the blogs, she goes to meetups, she kind of geeks out on the topic. I also know from seeing her in action that Jill is super detailed oriented and her planning skills are top notch. Also, I've seen Jill kind of interact with people within the organization, online and in person, and I know her people skills are sound. Because I've had conversations with her, I know that Jill is really interested in managing her own campaigns. She wants to run with a campaign. But right now, she's completing a master's degree part-time at a local university. So I can work with Jill to figure out a timeline by which I can give her a campaign to run. And in the meantime, I can help her carve out a time slot a week that she can dedicate to her studies so that she can complete those a bit faster and kind of manage her stress levels about doing 2 things at once, study and work. I can also give her exposure to strategic planning sessions and client meetings without crushing her under extra responsibilities until she wants to take those on. If I don't know Jill, if I don't know what she's good at, what she's into, what she wants to do, what's important to her right now, then I can't help. And if I can't help her, I'm a barrier to her growth. And if I'm a barrier to her growth, I'm limiting her contributions to the team, which ultimately holds her back and also holds the team back. So get to know your people, take the time. The second action you can take, which is super important, whether you're working remote or in a hybrid arrangement or you're back in the office, create space for humans to connect with each other as humans. So I'll give you a real life example. I was working with a public sector executive a couple of years ago, and her responsibility was to get business and IT stakeholders onto the same page just beyond the ideation phase. So she ran an intensive series of workshops where business and IT had to agree on what problem they were solving and what technology solutions would help solve it. And in this technology solutions, they will go into the details of that solution. For all intents and purposes, these workshops should have been brutal. They should have been the least looked forward to aspect of our week. And instead, because of how she ran them, they were super productive. So She started every session with 5 minutes of non-work talk. She would ask questions. Sometimes they'd be kind of these fun random questions. Sometimes she would simply ask, how are you guys doing today? But she would have a good 5 minutes at the beginning of each meeting for non-work talk. The result of this is we connected to each other as human beings, which meant when we did move on to the work portion of the session, we were far less combative, argumentative, defensive than what we would have otherwise been had we just walked into that workshop ready to tackle the subject. So take the time, ask non-work related questions, and this will also help you get to know your people. Okay, the third thing, change how you run your team meetings and your one-on-ones. Think of the last time you were in a team meeting. You probably talked about what's the status on your tasks. When do you think you'll get this done? What's the ETA? I think we should completely change how we run those meetings. And I'll admit, I used to run my meetings that way, right? Like, where are you at? When are you going to get this done, etc. Okay, you need 3 key questions. How did your week go? What's coming up next week? And how can I help? What can I do to help? Lead with these 3 questions will open up the door to a far more dynamic conversation. Because then you can get into things like, we were on a roll this week, but next week we're slammed with meetings. It's going to be difficult to carve out time to put our heads down. Or I had every intent of moving this forward, but I hit a bunch of roadblocks. And then as the lead in that meeting, as the manager or the team lead, you can get into conversations like, let's see where we can clear some time in your calendar by delegating some of those meetings. Or talk to me about those roadblocks. Let's see how we can resolve them and or make sure that they don't pop up on us again. So far more dynamic and productive than simply driving that meeting with status, ETA, timeline. 3 key questions. Okay, the 4th thing that you can do is empower your team members to make the decisions and equip them to own that accountability. So over the course of my career, decision making at the top has consistently been a point of friction at the working level. We're hired for our knowledge and skills, and yet we have no ability to make decisions. We should be entrusted to make certain decisions. And so when you look at your team, define decisions that your team members can have the authority to make. If you take on these 4 things, so get to know your people, carve out space for humans to connect with each other, change how you run your team meetings and your one-on-ones, empower them to make decisions, those are things that will communicate to your team members that you value them as people and you value their contributions. Okay, but there's a catch. For you to do these 4 things, you require things for yourself. So you need time. Getting to know people takes time. And in an old environment, in that control and command environment, you're probably thinking, yeah, but I've got to deliver all of this stuff. So that's the thing that needs to change. You can no longer have your plate full with things that you need to deliver because you need to take the time to circulate, to check in, to have informal and formal conversations in order to really reap the benefits of a people-centric management style. So you need time to talk to people. The second thing you need is an accountability framework. So I mentioned empowering your team members to make decisions. That means equipping them to take on accountability. You need to decide what that accountability will look like. So what I mean by this is you can't leave them out to hang if they make a bad call. You also can't completely shield them. So there's a sweet spot between those 2 things, and you need to define what that looks like and communicate it to them. You also need curiosity and a certain level of intuition. So I talked about supporting, empowering your team members. you won't have the time to go into the details anymore. You're there to manage and lead a team. And as I've said, this means taking the time to circulate, to check in. This doesn't leave a lot of time to get into the weeds with your team members. You'll need to know when to poke, when to ask questions, when to make suggestions, and you'll also need to know when you can just back off and trust that they've got it. This isn't easy. Knowing when to poke and knowing when to leave it, it's not an easy thing. And quite frankly, I think it comes from experience. And unfortunately, I think it also comes with getting burnt a few times. But all that to say is you need a certain level of curiosity and intuition to provide proper support to your team members. Okay, so there you have it. 4 actions that you can take to adopt a more people-centric management style. It's not, there are certainly a ton of other things that you can do. This isn't the end-all be-all, but it's a good start point. Now, I'm curious if some of you do these things already. I'd love to know what the impact is. Also, if you think, okay, I'm going to try these things out this week, I would love to hear how it goes. So please, comment to this post, share your experience. I would just love to hear feedback on this. So I hope this video was useful. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your week, and next video will drop in a couple of Wednesdays.